Welcome to the Testing Reality podcast. Over the last few weeks, we've been talking about why bugs still reach production, even though the testing teams are constantly testing them, right? And we spoke about the emulator gap, we discussed about the disaster coverage gap, we covered the visibility gap as well, and we spoke about this over the weeks. And today, we're going to dive deeper into the actual root cause of it all. And because a lot of teams don't actually have a testing problem, they have an infrastructure problem. And joining me today is Jessica, who's worked closely with a lot of QA and engineering teams across industries, be it fintech, e-commerce, or the healthcare or the banking sector. And she has seen exactly where testing breaks at scale. So welcome to the podcast, Jessica.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, so let's start with the number that keeps haunting us all the time, right? 4 hours. And you've said that many teams take around 4 hours for a typical device testing cycle. But the tests themselves might take only a few minutes. So where does the 4 hours go if it's just like a few minutes that it takes?
Yeah, so this is the part that most people miss when teams are saying testing takes too long. They assume the scripts are slow, but in reality, the scripts might run in 10 minutes. The 4 hours comes from everything around testing, right? Finding the right device, the access, waiting for someone else to finish, the OS versions, device resets, and app data issues, right? And coordinating across teams. So you'd be surprised how much time is wasted on that one question.
Wait, let me guess. I know this question. So where is the iPhone?
Exactly, right? Device availability. That question alone is responsible for more delayed releases than some production bugs.
So it's funny and scary at the same time, right? But anyway, over the last few episodes, we've built on this idea that, the teams don't fail because they don't care. They fail because testing doesn't match reality. And one thing that we've observed is something that we call the device testing wall. So could you please elaborate and talk about that for a bit?
Yeah, sure. So the device testing wall happens when a team scales, right? So early stage testing is manageable. You have 5 or 10 devices, a small QA team, and things feel fine. But the app grows, your users grow, your markets expand. The number of testing or the devices that you need to test in the wild explodes, right? And then leadership says we need broader coverage. Now QA has to test on 30 plus devices or maybe 50 or 100 then, right? And suddenly the entire QA function becomes more of a device operations where they need to have broader coverage and scale quickly.
So basically, what you're telling me is that testing becomes less about quality and more about device management and logistics.
Correct. Yeah, it ends up, and a lot of time gets consumed with that, right? And that's when you start hearing the same lines everywhere. The device lab is a mess, the phone is missing, the device is locked, it's stuck in an old build, or the battery is dead again, right? And because of which we can't run the suite today. And then the biggest one, right? Testing is slowing down the releases. So that's the wall. More devices means more management, and more management invariably ends up meaning more friction, and friction kills speed.
Well, I'm sure that some of the teams listening to this might say, okay, fine. So what's the big deal? Why don't we just run everything on emulators? It's cheaper, it's faster, and I mean, there's no hassle of device management involved, right? So why doesn't that solve the wall?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? Well, emulators are useful, but they're not reality, right? They're great for development iteration or quick checks and fast feedback loops. But production bugs don't happen in emulator environments, right? They happen in the messy real world conditions. And emulators can't capture things like memory pressure on real hardware or UI differences between OEMs, right? A network switching or battery constraints, right? And there are several other background restrictions and 40 other apps running on a typical, a real device situation. So, and that's what we had clarified in the earlier episodes as well. You can pass every test and still fail in production.
Well, that's great. So that brings us to the focus for today's podcast, right? So if teams need real devices, but device labs don't scale, right? Then what's the answer? Could you take a dig at and explain what a device cloud actually solves?
Yeah, sure. The breakthrough is simple, right? Teams don't need more devices. They need more coverage without the management burden, right? Most device labs fail because the moment you scale devices, you scale the chaos as well. So instead of asking how do we help teams manage 100 devices, the better question, right, would be how do we give teams access to 100 devices without them managing anything, right? And that's what a device cloud does. You log into a digital testing platform like pCloudy, and devices are there available instantly for you, right? Be it Samsung or Pixel or OnePlus, they're all ready, right? And old OS versions as well as the new, right? Budget phones as well as flagship phones are ready. And the best part is parallel execution. So instead of testing one by one, teams can run tests across dozens of devices at the same time.
Okay, well, that makes sense because, and that is how I think the wall breaks. Is that what you're hinting at?
Yes, because parallel execution really collapses time.
Okay, wow, it's that simple, is it?
Yeah, in fact, in a way, yes, right? We had recently helped a fintech firm solve a very similar issue. This team had the same story we've heard everywhere, right? Their full device testing cycle took around 4 hours. And because the test was slow, and the execution was serial, the access was painful, right? And when they moved to parallel execution on a device cloud, we could really observe the cycle dropped to 23 minutes. Same suite, more devices, so more coverage as well, and less time. And they ran it again because they didn't usually trust the first result, and they got the same output. And what changed wasn't just speed, the entire testing culture had changed.
And because suddenly testing isn't the thing that's blocking the releases anymore, I'm sure.
Right. So when you see those kind of results, the trust comes back again, and you're able to see that testing can be predictable, it can be repeatable. And once testing becomes predictable, teams stop cutting corners, they stop skipping coverage, they stop rushing the last minute sanity test before release, and they actually start testing like professionals again.
Wow, now that's interesting because in most organizations, right, you've seen the QA being the gatekeeper in some sense and the thing that slows down their own product, right? So, what happens to the team when you remove this friction?
Yeah. So first things that you would observe when something like this happens is right. You would observe. Yeah. First of all, everything improves in a sense, right? And they test more devices. So you naturally have more coverage without those management overhead. And secondly, they catch issues earlier because they have real world coverage. So the biggest shift is that testing stops becoming the bottleneck, it becomes an enabler for you. And in this fintech team that I was referring to, right, their deployment frequency tripled, not because leadership demanded it, but because the constraints were removed. Speed creates confidence, and confidence creates momentum.
Well, speed creates confidence. I love that line. And that line alone is worth another episode. Because, without confidence, teams delay shipping or they ship with a lot of fear.
Right, exactly. And when fear is removed, engineering teams actually become faster. Teams start shipping more often, and they ship faster. And that's what modern enterprises and product teams need.
Right. So basically, you're saying that many QA teams aren't really testing. We've already covered this in the previous episode as well. They're running more like a phone museum at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And a museum where everything is outdated and half the exhibits are missing, and the security guard is your QA lead.
Right. And somehow the iPhone is always the one that is the most revered artifact in that whole museum. So, Jessica, a final question. Like, so if we were to take this talk and summarize in in this talk. So, what is the one key takeaway from today?
Yeah, it's this, right? The biggest bottleneck in mobile testing isn't test writing. It's the device infrastructure. And when you remove that device friction, teams don't just test faster, they ship better.
Perfect. So, and on next week on the testing reality, we're going to tackle something we've hinted at multiple times, right? Because some teams want device cloud speed, but they can't really use public clouds like banking or healthcare or government regulated or other regulated industries where compliance is a big issue, and they need the same parallel execution, but under stricter compliance rules. So we'll unpack what teams do when public cloud is not an option. So thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next week.